Welcome back everyone, it is Mike from ManaHoarders. In this video we're bringing you a commander deck tech for a Lorehold commander, Hofri Ghostforge. You can cast Hofri for 3, a red and a white. You get a 4/5 legendary dwarf cleric. The first ability reads, spirits you control get +1/+1 and have trample and haste. The second ability reads, whenever a non-token creature you control dies, exile it. If you do, create a token that's a copy of that creature except it's a spirit in addition to its other types, and it has, when this creature leaves your battlefield, return the exiled card to your graveyard. Now obviously this commander ability is very unique, especially in this color pairing. Now with the second ability, we're going to be running plenty of creatures with powerful ETBs. This means when they enter the battlefield, we're going to be generating value, and then when they die, they'll enter again as a token copy, generating even more value. Now one main focus for our ETB triggers is to generate tokens and put +1/+1 counters on our creatures. This way we can build up a pretty surmountable force and run over our opponents. And quite possibly my favorite feature of this deck is the incredible staying power that it has. When Hofri is on the battlefield, even if our creatures die, we get a token copy of him right back. Now we have two ways to protect our board and give our creatures indestructible, but if we can't seem to keep them on the board, we have ways to recur them from our graveyard back to our hand, or even get them straight back onto the board to deal even more damage. Now with all of this in mind, I would rate the power level of this deck at around a 7 out of 10 on the power scale. There is plenty of room for improvements if you so wish, but I feel like this is a great place to start. And the final price for this build came in at $82.14. This does include the price of our commander and all of our lands. Now do bear in mind these prices will vary greatly depending on the quality of the cards you purchase, the vendor you use, and a variety of other factors. And without further ado, let's jump into the deck. First up are our artifacts. We have a Boros Signet. It can tap to give us a red and white mana. Commander Sphere can tap and give us one color of our commander's color identity. We can also sacrifice it to draw a card. Mind Stone taps to give us a colorless. We can also pay 1, tap it, sack it, and draw a card. And Mycosynth Wellspring. Whenever it enters the battlefield or is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, we can search our library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it into our hand, and then shuffle. Moving on to our creatures, we do have some legends helping out our commander. Alharu's Solemn Ritualist. Whenever Alharu enters the battlefield, we can put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 other target creatures. And whenever a non-token creature we control with a +1/+1 counter on it dies, we get a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. Anafenza Kintree Spirit. Whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under our control, we will bolster 1. This means we will choose a creature with the least toughness among creatures we control and put a +1/+1 counter on it. Anax Hardened in the Forge. Whenever a non-token creature we control dies, we get a 1/1 red satyr creature token. Also, if the creature had power 4 or greater, we get 2 of these tokens instead. And Brian Stoutarm, he has lifelink. We can also pay a red, tap him, sacrifice another creature, and Brian deals damage equal to the sacrificed creature's power to target player. And now for our not so legendary creatures, Abzan Battle Priest has Outlast, and each creature we control with a +1/+1 counter on it has lifelink. Abzan Falconer, each creature we control with a 1/1 counter has flying. And Anok Bond Kin, each creature with a 1/1 counter has first strike. Blood Aspirant, whenever we sacrifice a permanent, he'll get a 1/1 counter. We can also pay 1 in red, tap it, and sacrifice a creature or enchantment to deal 1 damage to target creature, and that creature also can't block this turn. Cataclysmic Gearhulk has Vigilance. Whenever it enters the battlefield, each player chooses an artifact, creature, enchantment, and a planeswalker from among the non-land permanents they control, then sacrifices the rest. Clarion Spirit. Whenever we cast our second spell each turn, we will get a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. When Dauntless Bodyguard enters the battlefield, we will choose a creature. We can sacrifice the bodyguard to give that creature indestructible. Doomed Traveler. Whenever it dies, we will get a 1/1 spirit. Dwaragar Hedgemage. Whenever it comes into play, if we control 2 or more mountains, we can destroy target artifact. If we control 2 or more planes, we can destroy target enchantment. Geist Honored Monk. Whenever it enters, we get 2 spirits, and the power and toughness are each equal to the number of creatures we control. Hallowed Spirit Keeper. Whenever it dies, we will put X 1/1 white spirit creature tokens with flying onto the battlefield, where X is the number of creatures in our graveyard. Hanged Executioner will enter and give us a spirit. We can also pay 3 and a white, exile our Executioner, and exile target creature. Kami of the False Hope. We can sacrifice to prevent all combat damage will be dealt this turn. Karmic Guide has flying, protection from black, echo. Whenever it enters the battlefield, we can return target creature card from our graveyard to the battlefield. We have Magus of the Wheel. We can pay 1 in a red, tap it, sacrifice it, and each player discards their hand and draws 7 cards. Whenever Meadow Boon leaves play, we'll put a +1/+1 counter on each creature target player controls. We can also evoke it for 3 and a white. Pillar Drop Rescuer. Whenever it enters the battlefield, we can return target creature card with mana value 3 or less from our graveyard to our hand. Revel Arc. Whenever it leaves the battlefield, we can return up to 2 target creature cards with power 2 or less from our graveyard to the battlefield. Sandstep Outcast. Whenever it enters, we can put a +1/+1 counter on it or put a spirit into play. Solemn Simulacra. Whenever it enters the battlefield, we can search for a basic land and put it on the battlefield tapped, and whenever it dies, we can draw a card. Whenever Sun Titan enters the battlefield or attacks, we can put a permanent with converted mana cost 3 or less from our graveyard onto the battlefield. Supply Runners, whenever it enters, will put a +1/+1 counter on each creature we control. Tithe Taker, during our turn, spells your opponent's cast cost 1 more to cast, and abilities cost 1 more to activate unless they're mana abilities. Twilight Drover, whenever a creature token leaves the battlefield, gets a 1/1 counter. We can also pay 2 and a white and remove a 1/1 counter to put 2 white spirits into play. And Usher of the Fallen, for 1 white mana, we get a 2/1 Spirit Warrior. Whenever it attacks, we can pay 1 and a white to create a 1/1 white human warrior creature token. Moving on to our enchantments, Barrage of Expendables, we can pay a red, sack a creature, and deal 1 damage to any target. Cathar's Crusade, an absolute beast in any deck that has ETBs or tokens. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under our control, we will put a +1/+1 counter on each creature we control. Court of Grace, whenever it enters the battlefield, we become the Monarch, and at the beginning of our upkeep, we create a 1/1 white spirit token with flying. But if we're the Monarch, we get a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying instead. Felidar Retreat, whenever a land enters, we can create a 2/2 white cat beast creature token, or put a +1/+1 counter on each creature we control, and those creatures gain vigilance until end of turn. Impact Tremors, whenever a creature enters under our control, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. Lunar Mantle, the enchanted creature gives +2/+2, and we can pay 1, sacrifice a permanent, and give that creature flying until end of turn. Makeshift Munitions, we can pay 1 of any color, sack an artifact or creature, and deal 1 damage to any target. Prophetic Ravings, the enchanted creature gets haste, we can also tap it to discard a card and then draw a card. Spirit Bonds, whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under our control, we can pay a white, and if we do, we get a 1/1 white spirit. We can also pay 1 and a white and sack a spirit to give target non-spirit creature indestructible until end of turn. Unquestioned Authority, whenever it enters, we will draw a card, and the enchanted creature has protection from creatures. For our instance, Angel Song, to prevent all combat damage will be dealt this turn. It also has Cycling for 2. Benevolent Offering, we will choose an opponent, then you and that player each put 3 1/1 white spirits into play. Then you choose an opponent again, and you gain 2 life for each creature you control, and that player gains 2 for each creature they control. Cloud Shift, we can exile target creature we control, then return it to the battlefield under our control. Eerie Interlude does much the same. Flicker of Fate, we can also exile target creature enchantment, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. Long Road Home does much the same, another way to flicker our creatures. Make a Stand, creatures we control get +1/+0 and gain indestructible. Rootborn Defenses gives our creatures indestructible, but we can populate. Semester's End, we can exile any number of target creatures and or planeswalkers we control, then at the beginning of the next end step we return each of them to the battlefield under its owner's control. Thrill of Possibility is an additional cost, we will discard a card to draw 2. Unbreakable Formation gives our creatures indestructible as well. And Valakut Awakening, we can put any number of cards from our hand on the bottom of our library, then draw that many cards +1. For our sorceries, Basri's Solidarity will put a +1/+1 counter on each creature we control. Cathartic Reunion, we will discard 2 cards to draw 3. Crash Through gives our creatures trample and draws us a card. Faithless Looting, we will draw 2 and then discard 2. Flicker can flicker one of our creatures. Illuminate History, we will discard any number of cards, then draw that many cards, then if there are 7 or more cards in our graveyard, create a 3/2 red and white spirit creature token. Renegade Tactics makes it so target creature can't block this turn, and we draw a card. Tormenting Voice, an additional cost, we will discard 1 to draw 2. And Warlord's Fury, creatures we control gain first strike until end of turn, and we draw a card. And last but not least is our mana base. We are keeping things very basic, with 18 basic plains and 17 basic mountains. And just like that, we reached the end of this Commander Deck Tech. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, tell your friends about us, and leave a comment down below. Let us know who you would like to see us build around in the future. With every new set comes even more legendaries, so we're excited to get brewing. And as always, we really appreciate your support.